Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to today's unique session of world literature by the Grunty. Some of you perhaps know that this session is as part of the celebration of 199th birthday of an iconic French writer, a pioneer of literary realism, Gustave Flaubert. Many thanks for all this support by Bronte's followers. And as you know, we have, and also many thanks to all of our guest speakers who kindly agreed to join and share their interpretation, share their opinion about Flaubert as part of today's session. Some of you perhaps know about the Grunty. The Grunty is actually a global literary platform that promotes the beauty of experimental voices, the beauty of unique writing. It was focused on more or less South Asian or Bengali experimental voices 30 years ago. It started journey about 30 years ago, and it was quite Bengali literature-centric platform. But day by day, it expanded, and now it became a global literary platform that promotes global philosophy, global literature, global poetry, more with an emphasis on experimental literature, unique literature by the writers and poets from all over the world. Some of you perhaps know it started 100 poets around the world, a groundbreaking journey. The ending session will be on this Thursday. 20th session. So we already interacted 95 phenomenal poets of the world, and the ending session will happen on this Thursday, the 17th of December. And look forward to having you all at the finale of 100 poets around the world for love. And as you also know, that after this project, after this initiative, the poetry that was read as part of the series will be published by the middle of next year, 2021. We're expecting to publish this by April or May into 2021. So we would like to express our gratitude to all of our audiences, to all of our poets, to all of our writers, philosophers, filmmakers who joined so far already as part of this, as part of our conversation series, as part of our poetry series. And would like to begin more literary initiatives in future. As you know, the Grunty Literature Festival, International Literature Festival will happen soon, and would like to have you all as part of the future literary initiatives of the Grunty. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our today's guests. So, first of all, let me introduce the editor of the Grunty, poet Shamim Shahan. Many thanks, Shamim Shahan, for joining as part of today's session, and a warm welcome.
Thank you, Kaisar. Many thanks to all of the guests attend this extraordinary session of talk that aims to promote and reinterpret groundbreaking works by an iconic French novelist, Gustave Flaubert. Flaubert is important not just because he is a phenomenal stylish fiction writer, but also because of his pioneering role for introducing literary realism that has inspired and influenced many, many major writers of the world after him. I am sure this discussion will help many audience and writers to reread Flaubert with profound and deep interest. The Granthi will bring the works of the major writers of the world at the core of our attention in regular basis. Many thanks again to the speakers today and the audience who are watching it virtually. Please share the live streaming in your timeline for your friends and followers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamshan. We have Shaheen Mitul, who is almost part and parcel of Granthi's activities. Warm welcome, Mitul, to this session, and many thanks for your help and support.
Thank you so much. I would like to cordially welcome all our distinguished guests for being part of this session. Thank you.
Right, many thanks, Mitul. So we have some wonderful speakers actually who joined as part of today's session. Professor, Doctor and poet and the Vice Chancellor former Vice Chancellor of Assam University, Tapadhir Bhattacharjee. Many thanks, Tapadhir, for joining as part of this session, and a warm welcome.
Thanks, Kaisa, and good evening.
Thank you. You're welcome. We also have John Fandon, a phenomenal poet, a playwright, a critic, a literary critic, a versatile writer, actually. Many thanks, John, for joining as part of today's session, and a warm welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. Actually, I'm not a literary critic, and Flaubert would definitely be very against critic. He hated critic, so I'm proud not to be a critic. But I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you. We also have Enrique Barnales Albites, a Peruvian poet and a professor of Spanish at Colorado University, North Colorado University. Many thanks, Enrique, for joining, and a warm welcome.
Thank you, Admes. Thank you, everybody here to join us tonight or in this morning, beautiful snowy morning in the mountains of Colorado, the Rocky Mountains. Thank you also to my dear friend Gabi Sambucetti that introduced me to you, Admet, to join this wonderful event tonight or in this morning in Colorado. Thank you so much.
It's quite morning in Colorado, is it?
Yes.
I mean,
it's 8:12.
Perhaps about 9 a.m. 9 a.m. Oh.
No, 8:12 a.m. yes.
Thank you, Enrique. We also have a very talented fiction writer and a very good reader as well, a model and an activist, Shri Ganguly. Many thanks, Shri, for joining as part of today's session, and a warm welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
Shri, we can't hear you. Can you just see whether the sound can be improved from your end?
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Without sound, perhaps, without the...
Perhaps without, this is not, but I'm really grateful that Granthi has decided to have me here. And Flaubert happens to be one of my very favorite writers. Madame Bovary being a book that I read through the ages and still trying to understand really. But it'll be an amazing discussion. Thanks for having me here. So much to learn.
Thank you. Many thanks, Shri. Let us start from Shri, perhaps, because Shri has so many interesting things, I believe, to share about Madame Bovary. As you know, Madame Bovary is a groundbreaking works by Flaubert. Flaubert that influenced so many writers after him, actually. There are some critics who always said, even from Kafka's style of being indifferent narration or narrative has been perhaps borrowed from the literary realism that Flaubert introduced. So he was a stylist, and he influenced so many great writers of 20th century, and especially I personally can mention Yosa, who received Nobel Prize about 4 or 5 years ago, a Latin American great author who acknowledged his debt to Flaubert's style of narrative. So we can perhaps talk about this, and especially Madame Bovary is very a groundbreaking piece of literature. And I'm personally very interested. I watched many films based on this great literary works. And I am also interested into, perhaps I shared that with Shri, that I'm trying to develop a feminist musical interpretation from Indian classical musical point of view. I'm trying to develop this. I'm writing on this now, and then perhaps we'll do a musical, opera style musical based on Madame Bovary. So let us listen, perhaps from Shri, your experience or your interpretation of Madame Bovary, if that's okay with you.
First of all, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Shri, one thing, can I mention one thing? Yes. The live streaming is available in Granthi, and now it's available in my page as well. So if you kindly share, I know that you have some guests and you have some followers who are perhaps looking forward to
definitely share
listen,
it.
so if you kindly share, Parmita Dasgupta, unfortunately, she came to Zoom. So Zoom is perhaps if you share it in your Facebook, she and your other followers can follow this discussion and live streaming.
I'm really bad. I'm trying to do it. But
would you like me to
hear me? I have a really soft voice, so I'm just wondering if you.
I think sound-wise okay, Shri. We'll check from audience's feedback. If but I sent the link to your WhatsApp as well. So if you kindly share from there, then your followers can perhaps watch from that link.
Sorry about this, guys.
No, that's fine. That's extremely okay.
I'm trying to share it. Just give me 1 second.
No, that's fine. That's okay.
Just give me 1 second. Let me just try and do it from the other computer. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 199th birthday celebration of a great, iconic writer, novelist, Flaubert. And I can share actually my experience. While I was the student of intermediate, I was doing ISC actually. That is what you said. Then I read Madame Bovary, and also I read something in English, something in Bengali actually, Bengali translation. Manavendra Bandyopadhyay, a wonderful translator and a pundit perhaps in comparative literature from Jadavpur University, who translated Flaubert. And that's what I read in my adolescence, actually. And a profound curiosity developed for Flaubert at that time. And then when I started reading many English translations of his works and many criticism, many interpretation on his works in English. And then I started reading some deconstructive works on his groundbreaking piece of novel, Madame Bovary. And that intrigued me, hugely influenced me, and especially the narrative, the way, kind of very, when someone will read, very indifferent and very emotionally, very without any emotional connection. That story, that almost quite, when someone is reading, especially Madame Bovary, perhaps the readers may experience the similar thing that I did. Almost all, what's that called? All writers who develop stream of consciousness. This is not stream of consciousness, but the narrative is almost like this, quite indifferent to the emotion or emotional connection. So ladies and gentlemen, we have Shri Ganguly. We would like to hear from Shri Ganguly's experience of reading Madame Bovary.
It's such a complex book. You know, I first read it when I was 13 years old. And
can everyone hear Shri?
Can you hear me?
Okay, great. Okay, fantastic. John said yes, so it means you're okay. Yes, that's fine.
So it was a moment, the book I had stolen from my, grandfather's cabinet, and I just read it. And it was the unabridged version, and I didn't completely understand it. I was sad, very sad after reading it. And then, in college, we did it again, we studied it. I have a little write-up about Madame Bovary. I've put down my feelings. It's about 10 minutes because I'm not really that great at the spoken word. My feelings about Madame Bovary is very complex. I think it's not what it seems. I think the prose is very sensuous yet simple. His style, Flaubert's style, is something, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, the way he's woven the story, it was one of a kind at that point. But apart from technicalities, I feel very moved by the story. I don't know why. I mean, I relate to many of the characters. I relate to Charles. I feel for him. I relate to Emma. I feel for her as well. How that's possible, I don't know. But yes, I have done a 10-minute write-up on this, and I can read it out. Or would you want me to do that later? Do you want me to read it now? What do you think? What do you want? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Do you want me to read the?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please.
Okay,
please.
I'll do that. So, who is Emma actually? Do we ever speak the truth? The truth that we really feel inside. Maybe the truth is like a window, and our righteousness, a little bird that crashes on it again and again, quivers, dies. Maybe truth is frightening because we are at war with the act of living itself. Maybe death is the only answer. Emma spent most of her time looking out of the window. Like most women of our time, like a wind-up doll, she looked out at the world through dark, glassy eyes. Spent years inside a box. Body stuffed with straw, unfeeling, mechanical, wrapped in layers of dainty lace. Till she was laid to rest in a wooden box, under many layers of the red earth. Emma liked the dainty lace, but resented the box. She had dreams and ambitions, but no proper way of fulfilling them. In other words, she was a lost girl. She lived in the world of books because, frankly, there was no other way of exploring. I hate staying in one place for long, she had said. Her books were portals to so many worlds. Many years back, I sat on a window too, looking out at a late summer's day. I could smell the dusty aging stones of my great-grandfather's house. A space rooted in tradition, in convention. 3 generations had lived here, fought, loved, shared, died. There were traces of their stories scattered around, the marks and the cracks. There were ghosts living inside many ravaged old books. I was reading Madame Bovary for the first time, a book that had belonged to my great-grandfather. I had discovered it in a corner cupboard out of sheer boredom, like Emma had discovered her lovers. And here I was, in the strange hollow belly of the house, half lit through scorched summer leaves, the whole of my 13 years of existence, immersed in Emma's world. Immersed, appalled. No one knew what I was reading. My grandmother was gently dozing on the sofa, and my mother was chatting with a neighbor. They were occasionally singing songs. Rabindra Sangeet, if you know what that means to a Bengali. Soft raw words, poems strung into songs of lace, sweet, poignant. The crisp smell of cotton saris hung heavy in the air. In this air, I doodled her name. Emma, I wrote. It became an invisible name. Emma married young and turned into Madame Bovary, devoted wife, doting mother, all the things that she could not be, and all the things that she was, wavered, led, dreamy, self-absorbed, a slave of consumerism, adulterous. In spite of those things, there was another side to her. Something that could never be touched. Something enigmatic. Something that blurred more and more as you came closer. As if she had taken a life of her own. There was a part of her that even Flaubert could never touch. Madame Bovary is not true. Flaubert had stated emphatically, many times. It's a totally made-up story. I did not put anything of my feelings or my existence into it. The illusion, on the contrary, is from the impersonality of the work. The artist must be like a god in creation, invisible, powerful. And yet, Emile Zola once observed that the book was profoundly, shatteringly real. There was a tenderness to Emma that made her real. There were moments when she loved her husband. While dying, she touched his hair. She said he was kind, very, very kind. There were moments when she even loved her child. She wanted to know how it felt to be a mother. She had no choice but to be one. She had no choice but to play the role, to fit a mold that righteousness had carved for her. She had wanted a boy. She wanted her child to be free. The kind of freedom she had denied. She had been denied. It was Emma's tragedy that chose her truth. In the end, she suffered a slow, painful death. Perhaps it was shame that killed her bit by bit. Flaubert had taken 5 torturous years to write this book. He had been obsessed with every single word, even with creating the sentences. A good sentence in prose should be like a good line in poetry, unchangeable, rhythmic, sonorous. As if he was trying to create a whole out of little sensuality and intellect, the head and the torso, and the many other incomplete parts that make us whole. The different senses that we feel in each of them. Is it even possible to be whole? I mean, Or are truths just made of little incomplete parts? 12 hours a day at his writing desk, he would even shout out sentences to gauge their rhythm. It sometimes took him up to a week to finish a single page, a word. A year's worth once yielded 90 pages. Last night, I began to write my novel. Now I foresee difficulties of style. They terrify me. It's no small thing to be simple. Flaubert said in one of his letters, sentences keep itching without coming to a head. This makes me so desperate. Actually, I enjoy it. A fortnight from now, I hope to be in gear, but the colors I'm working with are so new to me. In one of his letters to Colette, his lover, he explained how he was giving up his entire life to work on just one page of the book. Last week, I spent 5 days writing one page. Everything else for it, my Greek, my English, I gave myself up to it entirely. What worries me is my book is the element of entertainment. That side is weak. There is not enough action. I maintain, however, that ideas are action. It's more difficult to hold the reader's interest with them. I know, but if the style is right, it can be done perhaps. I'm now 50 pages in a row without a single event, thankfully. Next September, it will be 3 years spent on the same idea, writing in the same style, living continuously with the same characters, the same surroundings, clobbering oneself to maintain the same illusion. In a letter to one of his closest friends, Flaubert shared his mother's assessment of his obsession. He even laughed about it. Your mania for sentences has dried up your heart, his mother said. And out of that dry heart, he had given birth to a real woman. Or and flesh and bones. Someone with longing and pain. Someone with a temper. Someone with appetite for life. Someone open to explore sensuality. Someone who sought emotion, not landscapes. Someone who was not afraid to fall in love with the wrong man. In some way, Flaubert did not want to let her go. Maybe he had fallen in love with Emma himself, in spite of her flaws. The window filled with rain. I could smell the lake at a distance. Emma's favorite thing, the sun setting in water. Everything else was silent. Emma was dead. So was Charles. It all felt so real. It was another window I was looking out of when I got the news. A cold winter night, snowing, yet I could see many stars shining at a distance. Skeletons of trees, everything sharp and poignant and throbbing. My grandmother had just died. She had been found in the house she had lived in all her life. My great-grandfather's house, the house full of old books and boxes, the house near the lake. For some reason, I remembered a story she had told me years back. My blue-eyed grandmother, named Helena after the Helen of Troy, vivacious, intelligent. She had sobbed uncontrollably on her wedding day. My grandfather had disappointed her. He was more than a decade older, a few inches shorter than her in height, and had seemed dull and serious and sullen. She had seen him for the first time on her wedding day. Out of righteousness, those were the old rules laid out, rigid, inflexible. Eventually, she had made peace with the rules. She even loved him in a way. He was dependable, she said, honest and kind. He had a warm heart, she said, and the fact that she had been so disappointed in the beginning was something she had laughed about later. That is how she lived in the house, widowed at 40, wrapped in white saris, a good mother, a good wife, lonely, sad, diminished, trapped. And now she was dead. Emma had chosen to die. She would not let life touch her in defeat. She would die with pride. She would endure the pain she had caused, bit by bit, the poison slowly eating her up. Like a wind-up doll, she looked out at the world through dark, glassy eyes. Spent inside a box, body stuffed with straw, unfeeling, mechanical, wrapped in layers of dainty lace, she broke away till she was laid to rest in a wooden box under layers of red earth. She was only 27. She had died, but she had lived. When asked about his classic, Flaubert often said, "I am Madame Bovary." What did he mean? Why did he say that? He had loved and lost like Emma had, a master of realism, and yet in his heart he was lonely, defeated by life. I'm 35, I'm 5 feet 8 inches tall, I have shoulders of a porter and the nervous irritability of a little mistress. I'm single and I'm lonely. He had written in a letter to one of his fans. Maybe Madame Bovary is a cautionary tale that warns you about what life can be. You who have dared to dream. Maybe I'm Madame Bovary. Maybe you are Madame Bovary too.
Exactly. Exactly. How beautiful. How beautiful, Shri. This interpretation is actually, these interpretations are needed. And that is why the title of this event is Rereading and Reinterpreting Flaubert, and especially Madame Bovary in new context. And how beautifully you recontextualize Emma in this wonderful writing and reading. Many, many thanks, Shri. And I'm sure audiences are equally fascinated by your reading and new way of exploring Emma, and especially contextualizing Emma in everyone at this moment, everyone of this time. Can we kindly have some audience's feedback, Mitul, if you kindly, before we move on to the next?
Could you all hear me though? Could you hear?
Exactly, we did.
Because I think one of you didn't have the mute on. I think it was the professor, so I could hear a lot of things. But...
No, I think I did quite clearly. I'm not sure about others. John said he did. So
yes, I did too.
Everyone did.
Thank you.
So there are lots of comments. Sorry if I miss any. Rosanna Camarena has written, "It's beautiful listening
a Mexican friend. And I always said, Rosanna, that I'm a big fan of Carlos Fuentes. And then she's a wonderful poet from Mexico. And she attended our 100 Poets Around the World. She joined our 100 Poets Around the World as well. And she's a grand supporter of Granti's literary activities. Many thanks, Rosanna, for watching from Mexico.
And Dr. Amol Pal has written a wonderful session, enjoying. Krishnapriya Bhattacharya has written, "Happy to see you, Professor Tapadhir Bhattacharjee, here together with others." Gabby Sambushetty has written, "Madame Bovary, love." Tyler Sid, "At war with the act of living, nice. Gabi Sambusheti
Many
has
thanks,
also
Gabi.
written
Gabi is a
awesome.
friend, an Argentine friend, an Argentine poet. We did the book launch of Gabi just a week ago. Many thanks, Gabi, for watching, and many thanks for your input. Krishnapriya Bhattacharjee is a poet as well, watching from Shiliguri, India. And Dr. Amol Pal from Leeds, a wonderful friend of us. Many thanks for watching. Any more comment?
Yes, Uttiya Bandhopadhyay, the sound is fine. Watching Rizwanullah Arvi, very touching. Dr. Nabaran Bhaumik, well spoken and inferred. Sharat Chantiam, beautiful. Prabir Datta Gupta, it's a privilege to watch this discussion, interesting discussion virtually. Many thanks. Mushtaq Din watching. And then Shubhashi Shaha, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to our next speaker, Enric. So before I move on to Enric, I would like to tell you all that Flaubert is such a phenomenal writer of 19th century. Perhaps he's iconic because before him, Balzac or Hugo perhaps developed one way of French narrative, French literature, French prose writing. And then Zola or Stendhal or Proust, everyone is aware of their writing, but he actually influenced and introduced a new way of writing, and that is called literary realism. Whenever he depicted the character Emma, I was always thinking of Chekhov's that short story. I forgot the name. And that is also about womanhood, quite feminist story. He has multiple affairs. And then once you started reading it, you feel perhaps this could be another patriarchal writing. A man is writing about woman, and perhaps this is not justice to this character. And Tolstoy actually made a comment on that short story. I just forgot. So, and then he was also quite phenomenal in terms of his inclination to pantheism. He was quite in favor of Spinoza's the idea of religion, idea of freedom, and idea of pantheism as well. And especially the writing, apart from his literary writings, he's also quite his letters to Louise Colette, his lover, and also George Sand, another lady who is quite highly popular, not within just France, but also in global literature. So these letters also are equally important while we are trying to read it or reinterpret Flaubert, Gustave Flaubert. So let us perhaps start reading some of those letters before I move on to Andre. So Mitul, if you kindly read some of the, some text from those letters, if that's okay with you, and then we will move on to Andre, a friend, a Peruvian poet, and also a prose writer as well. But in the meantime, Mitul, if you kindly read a couple of.
I'll read a little extract from Flaubert's letter to Joanne. I must scold you for one thing, which shocks, scandalizes me. The small concern, namely, you show for art just now. As regards glory be it so, there I approve. But for art, the one thing in life that is good and real, can you compare with it an earthly love? Prefer the adoration of a relative beauty to the cultus of the true beauty? Well, I tell you the truth. That is the one thing good in me, the one thing I have. To me, estimable. For yourself, you blend with the beautiful a heap of alien things, the useful, the agreeable, what not. The only way not to be unhappy is to shut yourself up in art and count everything else as nothing. Pride takes the place of all, beside when it is established on a large basis. Work, God wills it. That, it seems to me, is clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to read any more text, Mitul?
I can read another little extract from one of his letters. I am a little remorseful to take whole days from your work. I, who am never bored with loafing, and whom you could leave for whole hours under a tree, or before two lightened logs, with the assurance that I should find there something interesting. I know so well how to live outside of myself. It hasn't always been like that. I also was young and subject to indignations. It is over. Since I have dipped into real nature, I have found there an order, a system, a calmness of cycles which is lacking in mankind, which man can, up to a certain point, assimilate when he is not too directly at odds with the difficulties of his own life.
Good.
Thank you, Mitul. Our next speaker is Enric Barnales Alvarez, a wonderful friend of us, and a Peruvian author and cultural promoter. He has PhD in Latin American literature from Boston University. Currently, he is assistant professor of Spanish at the University of Northern Colorado. So many thanks, Enric, for joining. We would like to have your input on Flaubert.
Yes.
Many thanks for joining, and warm welcome again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, the Grande. Thank you, my dear friend,
I'm having another sound from somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's the Professor. If she can silence.
Can we put ourselves in mute by any chance? It looks like we are having some sort of sound from somewhere. I'm not sure where it is coming from. Right, okay. If you kindly continue.
Yes, thank you, dear Ahmed. Thank you, the Grante. Thank you, everybody that is joining us today to this beautiful and event to celebrate the legacy of Gustave Flaubert. I have many ideas about the work of Flaubert. So I'm going to jump from one idea to another to try to share with the people, with the audience, some interesting findings that we can right now to understand the legacy of this extraordinary writer. First, as a literary critic, I'm very fan of history. We need to locate Flaubert in history. No, we are talking about the 19th century. No, Jorge Luis Borges, one of the greatest writers ever lived in this planet, in Earth.
Exactly. Wow.
He is a 19th century writer, and he is a 19th century individual. No, what means that 19th century is the time of revolution. Time of the birth of many republics, of the thanks to the Romanticism too, no? But also is the start of the breathtaking industrial revolution, no? And also is the century of the energy, no? Later developed in psychoanalysis by Sigmund Freud, no? But it's very interesting, for example, in the case of Madame Bovary and the character of Emma Bovary, who we are speaking. Who is Emma Bovary? Now, in these times of social networks, these times of individualism, these times when money rules, we take for granted something that in the 19th century people were fighting for, individualism. No? Emma Bovary wasn't Anna Karenina, was an aristocrat, was a common woman from the countryside.
Exactly.
No? Like, and he wants to experiment life, desire, to fulfill her desires, no, through literature, no, because she was a reader of romantic novels. What means this? Like the 19th century also is the beginning of the professionalism in writing, in terms of the writing industry. No, that is very important point. No, and also in the case of Gustave Flaubert, we are seeing like he spent 5 years of his life to write Emma Bovary, the character and also the story, and to create this kind of legacy in terms of the realism style in writing. No, but many of the contemporaries of Gustave Flaubert, they were professional writers and write a novel like every year or in 5 months, no, like a Stendhal. No, this is story of like Cartuja, very famous Stendhal work that was written in I think 50 or 60 days, something like that. No, so it's interesting how a writer like Gustave Flaubert take the time to develop this style, but also this novel, no? Different like their contemporary, I am talking 19th century French fiction was amazing. We have like a Jules Verne, we have Alexander Dumas, we have Stendhal, we have Zola, we have too many, Chateaubriand, we have Maupassant, we have also Balzac. I mean, like those extraordinary writers. But 19th century is the revolution of writing. In terms of poetry, we are talking about Rimbaud. Arthur Rimbaud changed the poetry forever, the same way like Gustave Flaubert changed fiction writing forever in terms of realism. No? One thing that I really like about this author, Gustave Flaubert, is how he understands their times. Something like sometimes new writers, they enjoy this life and we have with social networks, with the apps like Netflix. I mean, all this new life of technology, no? But what I think make so interesting Flaubert for our times is how he really understands the power of the industries of his times, and also the development of new kind of energy that is so important right now. Like before we started the event, we were talking about the followers and the people is joining this event, no? That kind of the mass public joining us started in the 19th century, no? And start with the power of the individual, no? We are talking about character Emma Bovary. She was an aristocrat. She was a common woman that wants to enjoy pleasure of lives, no? But this idealism that she learned and enjoyed from fiction writing, romantic literature, no? She has some lovers, and she didn't fulfill those desires with these other men in her life, no? But it's part of the question that we have right now, no? We capitalist society, no? Like we have the opportunity to buy things, but then when we have those things, those objects of desire, no? We are disappointed because those are not enough. We want something else. And that kind of pre-psychoanalysis you can find there in the novel of Gustave Flaubert, Madame Bovary, this power of the unconscious of the individual that wants to fulfill desires, no? Through this mediation that is literature, no? Also, I think Isaac Newton, there is a phrase that was connected with him, like, I build all my knowledge over the shoulders of giants, no? In terms of the high-breaking physics theory and all the development of the revolution, scientific revolution he started, I can see also in the case of Flaubert, this, the wonderful presentation of Shri, for example, Ackman, all the comments of the great people here with us, is like, without romanticism, we don't have Madame Bovary. I mean, like, we need to connect. I mean, like, the idea of the genius of the author is connected with history too. And also the resistance of trying to change something before him, or like, for example, in the case of Gustave Flaubert, there are many Latin American writers, Peruvian ones, like Mario Vargas Llosa, that wrote about him, like The Perpetual Orgy, Orgía Perpetua, and also Julia Ramón Ribeiro, one of our best short writers also in the 20th century, like Julio Ramón Ribeiro was called the best 19th century Peruvian writer. No? They were making a joke about him, but in fact, it's because he was very fond of the Gustave Flaubert style of writing and how he exposed the contradictions of the society in his times. No,
but Enrique, does it mean even before Llosa, Mario Vargas Llosa,
yeah,
Flaubert was still quite popular in Peruvian and Latin American literature?
Yes, yes, because the thing is, like, Flaubert, a part of his novels, like happened with Shaheen, was reading some of the letters, no? The letters, those interfaces are very important for writers, no?
Right.
For example, that differentiates Gustave Flaubert from other 19th century French writers, no? Always when we think about documents and show how to write, of the importance of style, or how hard and how obsessive was Gustave Flaubert with literature, we found those letters that were published. No? So that kind of devices, literary devices, also tell us, to the new writers, the young writers, it's like, I don't know, Rainer Maria Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet, like that kind of information, so encourage other people to write. Although in the case of Gustave Flaubert, there were private letters, no? And when he died, he didn't know those letters were very important for many writers around the world. No? Latin American writers, Indian writers, Bengali writers, European writers, African writers, other Asian writers. I mean, like that kind of what we call interfaces tell us a lot of information about the style, and also how to create a work, a literary work, no? But the thing, when I was mentioning Julio Ramón Ribeiro, is that Gustave Flaubert understand, like Cervantes, the idea to create some kind of parody of the literary that was important in his time and was in decadence in that time, the Romanticism, no? The love are romantic, no? And the same did Cervantes when Don Quixote, when he was making a parody of cavalry romance, no? Mm-hmm. That was in that time in the 16th century, Spain, just kind of decadent literature.
Yeah.
Cervantes created something new,
yeah.
No? But in some way, connected with the previous literature. It's what is very important here, no? For example, we have in Madame Bovary, we have this breathtaking realist.
Enrique, is that okay if we can come back to you? I mean, especially sure. Madame Bovary is, I know this is groundbreaking. When it comes to Flaubert, we can always try to relate Madame Bovary, but he has some other phenomenal novellas as well. I'm not sure whether anyone read The Temptation of Saint Antoine, which he wrote being influenced by Bruegel the Elder, the painting of Bruegel the Elder. And he worked on this novella for almost for the whole adult life, actually. So we can try to relate some of his other works as well, if that's okay. But we'd like to go to John now. But in the meantime, Mitul, if you kindly read some audience's feedback, if that's okay.
Sure. Junaid Nasheed Val, now enjoying. Florentino Diaz, Enrique, how they understand their times and how we understand ours. That's right. Flaubert brings contemporary ways to listen to ourselves too. Thanks for those actions about it. Then Zaki Zafran, enjoying the program, simply amazing. Alok Shahan, nice program. Pablo Khaled, fantastic discussion. Pam Ghosh, so beautifully interpreted. Shri, love the interplay of Emma's reality.
Many thanks again to Shri.
Of the women in your lives.
You contemporize the character Emma in this life, actually. So many thanks. The idea of contemporize this character. Okay.
Gabi Sambushetty, thank you. Krishna Priya Bhattacharjee, so he said it is okay, I'm not sure. Uddiya Bandhopadhyay, fascinating.
Thank you. Many thanks, Mitul. So our next speaker is John Fandon. John Fandon is a writer from London. He has written over 1,000 non-fiction books, which have been translated into scores of languages. And he has been shortlisted for many awards. He also is a songwriter, playwright, and poet whose poems have been performed at places including the Lyra Poetry Festival in Belgium, the Edinburgh Festival, and at Oxford, and translated into Russian and Uzbek. John is a celebrated translator of poetry from Russia and Central Asian languages, such as Kazakh and Uzbek. His translations of the poetry of Lydia Grigorieva were nominated for 6 major awards. He was joint winner of the European Bank RD Literature Prize in 2019 for his translation of Uzbek poetry in Hamid Ismailov's The Devil's Dance, and his translation of Kazakh author Roland Sesenbayev's The Dead Wonder in the Desert was finalist of the US Pen Translation Award in 2020. So many thanks again, John, for joining. Warm welcome. Before I request John to start. Can anyone, because obviously while I was listening and I was trying to relate, what is that story, name of the story that I read on by Chekhov, where the female character was falling in love from one to another. And then obviously you thought perhaps this became another patriarchal story, but then the character became quite unique when it developed a motherhood in that character. I
think you mean The Lady and the Dog.
Huh?
I think you mean The Lady and the Dog.
Exactly. Thank you very much, John. I was listening and then my brain was somewhere else. You know, I was just trying to.
It's a great story. Chekhov is a wonderful story.
And unbelievable, amazing story by Chekhov. Anyway, thank you, John. If you kindly share your input on Flaubert.
Okay. Well, hello everybody, and thank you for being here. I must admit, I feel I'm not an expert on Flaubert, so I'll only share my own personal thoughts. And I want to thank Shri for an absolutely beautiful and personal interpretation. I feel I can't really follow that, actually. And Enrique's fascinating and insightful range across the whole wealth of literature and putting it in context. It's fantastic. So I will only say a little bit and it will be small in comparison. But anyway, I will go ahead. I mean, I'll just tell you one of the things that I like about Flaubert, and it's his precision. And he was in some ways, the pioneer of le mot juste, the exact the perfect word. And he'd spend hours, as Sri said, or even days finding just the right word, the right phrase, and going to and fro until he had honed it to perfection. And the result is that his phrases are intensely memorable. It's no accident when it comes to quotes identified on Goodreads. Flaubert is in a league of his own. And there are pages and pages of Flaubert quotes, and I don't think that's any accident. Even translated into English, his choice of words is powerful, elegant, and apposite. And it's something that, as a children's non-fiction writer, I appreciate immensely. With non-fiction, and especially children's non-fiction, there's the check of facts to ensure that the meaning is exact. And the need for simplicity and often limited space means that prose must be very precise and well honed. And I often spend a long time myself finding the perfect phrase to explain, say, quantum physics in a friendly way in just 20 words. So I know just what Flaubert was up to when he searched for exactitude. And one might say that fiction is rather different from non-fiction, but I don't quite agree. I do a lot of translation of literary poetry and prose, and it irks me when an author or poet, as all too often, rambles on vaguely using the cloak of fiction to hide behind. Vagueness in phrasing is often vagueness in thought, laziness in the imagination, the woolliness that lets the reader down. Most great poets and many great prose writers, Flaubert especially, were masters of precision and often concision too. As Flaubert himself said, poetry is as precise a thing as geometry. But it would be a mistake to think of Flaubert's Le Mot just as mere pedantry. It was for Flaubert about style, and style is not simply surface gloss. To quote Flaubert himself, style is as much under the words as in the words. It is as much the soul as it is the flesh of the work. Just listen to that. Style, he says, is the soul of the work. The writer's style for Flaubert was an integral part of his or her art, and a deep part of the creation, as Michelangelo's style was to creating the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. The craft and nuts and bolts of writing, the handling of language, are not just boring journeyman skill, but the very essence of the art of writing. This, Flaubert asserted, does not come easy. One arrives at style only with atrocious effort, with fanatical and devoted stubbornness, he said. But it was worth it. Another quote from him: one never tires of what is well written. Style is life. It is the very blood of thought. And Flaubert detested those who thought writing was just an outpouring of emotion. One mustn't always believe that the feeling is everything in the arts. It is nothing without form. For Flaubert, the idea was to create the perfect illusion, the most precise and beautiful picture, using the exact right words in the right order. And styles is the writer's choice of colors, the way he handles his brush, his sense of perspective and scale. It is never a splurge of uncontrolled feeling. The most important quality of art and its aim is illusion, he said. Emotion, which is often obtained by certain sacrifices of poetic detail, is something else entirely and of an inferior order. He wanted to create a sense of wonderment, he said. He said, what seems to me the very highest and most difficult achievement of art is not to make us laugh or cry or to rouse our lust for anger, to do as nature does, and that is to fill us with a sense of wonderment. This approach has been a powerful inspiration to writers ever since, and one reason why Flaubert's work has often been described as a landmark of literature. And yet, I want to come back to something that Sri was hinting at earlier. And this is, although this is Flaubert's stated credo, although he hammers home that belief in style, and it's something that's emphasized in interpretations of Flaubert all down the line, I don't think, and I think this is something that Shri was, he is not that dogmatic. He is not so strict in his idealism and his need for perfection. In some ways, actually, that's something that he was hiding behind to disguise his human frailties. And I think that's what a lot of us do as writers. And I think that the extraordinary thing about Madame Bovary, and again, it's something that Shri was alluding to beautifully early. I mean, he starts painting a very critical picture of her lack of restraint, her loose emotions. And you almost think that he doesn't like Emma. And yet, towards the end, he warms to her. And as, again, Shri hinted earlier, he said to a journalist later, Madame Bovary, c'est moi. And I think that this is the kind of truth of, and this is why above and beyond all the style, the reason why Madame Bovary, and not just Madame Bovary, but all his letters, his other novels, which TM was hinting about earlier, are not actually what he says they are. He is a creature of emotions. He is a creature a lot more human than he likes to say he is. And I think that this is one of the things that the connection with feminism, Madame Bovary isn't a feminist novel, and yet it's had quite an impact for feminism down the years. And I think it's because of a man acknowledging in some ways that he is not perfect. He is not capable of, he doesn't have to conquer the world. And I think that admits to a different, if you like, response from people. And so that's why I kind of think that there is something a lot deeper, and why Flaubert's novel means a lot more, because it's than just style. But I think that said, the style is really, really important, because he, with his art, he realized he could, it's an interesting thing, because one of the things about masculinity is control. And Flaubert believed in style to control the world. It was a kind of form of control, is kind of, I can control my world, I can control my literature, I control emotions through style and the precise words. And I think that ultimately what makes him as a great novelist and very influential is that actually he knew in his heart that that wasn't enough. That really, really isn't enough. That's you've got to allow another side. So I'm just going to finish off with two ways, actually, two phrases of his, because I think it was incredibly beautiful how he could make a memorable phrase that stuck in your head, memorable image with just a perfect phrase. So I'll just take these things, and both are from his letters, which that's TM, they're amazing. And it's just such a kind of haunting image. It says, my soul has been haunted by something like those forgotten melodies that come back to us at twilight, during those slow hours in which memory, like a ghost among ruins, stalks our thoughts. So that's first, and it's just so, for me, that's very unforgettable. And here is another one. Once one has kissed a cadaver's forehead, there always remains something of it on the lips, an infinite bitterness, an aftertaste of nothingness that nothing can erase. So thank you very much, everybody.
Many thanks. Many thanks, John. Wonderful. I'll come back to you soon. Our next speaker is Professor Tapadhir Bhattacharjee. So Tapadhir Bhattacharjee is a poet, essayist, and literary theorist and critic. He is the former Vice Chancellor of Assam Central University and the forerunner of contemporary Bengali literature. His constant research on the recent literary theory and application of the West is well known amongst the readers in both West Bengal and Bangladesh. He has 141 books to his credits so far in both Bengali and English. Essayist Tapadhir made his debut as a poet in the 70s, and his first poetry book is called Tumi Shei Prito Kushon. The total number of his poetry collection to date is 35. He retired as an emeritus professor of the Department of Bengali, Assam Central University. He also played a vital role as a professor of modern Indian languages and literature at the University of Delhi. Some of his noteworthy publications are Pratichcher Sahitya Tattva, Nari Chetona, Mononeo Sahitya, Akhaner, Boheshwar. And perhaps he's the one who introduced Bakhtin, Mikhail Bakhtin, a very important theorist, Russian theorist in Bengal. So many thanks, Tapadhir, for joining, and a warm welcome again. If you kindly unmute yourself, I muted actually. I have muted you, so if you kindly unmute yourself. We can't hear you unless you unmute yourself. Let me see whether I can send a request. Now, Tapadhir, to unmute. Yes, yeah, you did it.
Yes, I think it is unmuted now.
Yes.
So thanks once again, Kaisa, and also my fellow speakers here. In particular, I have been really enthralled by the eloquence of Enrique and the very analytical discourse by John. And of course, at the very outset, Sri also enthralled us. Now, let me tell you very briefly that I have concentrated only on Madame Bovary. And fortunately, or whatever.
No, that's fine. That's fine, Tapadhir.
You can't hear?
Yeah, we can, yes.
Yeah. So now, as a very important literary theorist, Jacques Derrida, told us, you should commence your deconstruction right from the title itself. So the question is, why the name is not Emma? That is the name of the heroine. Why it is Madame Bovary? Is there any significance in it? I think it has really much of a significance. Now, when I was listening to particularly Sri at the very outset and thereafter to two other speakers, I was thinking of Simone de Beauvoir's very famous statement in The Second Sex, the free woman is just being born. So if the free woman is just being born in the mid-20th century, so how do you really look at Emma and her failures, if I may use this word, in her life? And is there, and the more important question is, nowadays we are engaged in deconstructionist reading and many other sorts of readings. But whether I was posing this question to myself, whether a feminist reading is at all possible of Madame Bovary. Well, there are other things also. And all these things conglomerate on the central point. Now, in his teenage, much long before he wrote Madame Bovary, Flaubert wrote Madame Bovary, he wrote a book entitled Memoirs of a Madman, which may be found in his collected works. There, I found a very interesting statement. Words are only stammerings and language is important. Now, in 1857, when Madame Bovary, the masterpiece, was being published, we don't find the importance of language. Rather, we find the expressive power of language. Because only through the prism of language, through the flow of language, we can really understand, interpret rather. We should use the word interpret Emma better. And not only Emma, we can talk about her husband. And in the very first chapter of the novel, as we all know, her husband was introduced to the readers. And through very subtle use of language, diction, his character, his personality, or the lack of it, has been made very, very clear to us. And the same thing we can talk about Rodolphe, the person in which she entered into first relationship, extramarital relationship. And the same thing we can talk about the second one, because the evidence you will find only in the texts. I have found out some particular portions because ultimately there is no outside in the text. So you have to rely on what the text signifies to you through the proper use of language. You see, Emma attracts us, fascinates us with her eyes. And in the text, the functioning of her eyes makes its appearance many a times. Sometimes it's brown, sometimes it's black or blue, sometimes large and dark, sometimes piercing, sometimes flaming, and in the last very tragic death, these eyes fade into a viscous pallor. So this is not a trick of language. Let us remember, Enrico was a poet perhaps, and he was talking of Rainer Maria Rilke and others. Let us remember in the mid-19th century, French poetry was reaching the acme of its perfection. Then we know about Charles Baudelaire, and I am not speaking of others. So the person, that is our author, who told us in his teenage that words are only stammerings and language are important. In the end, he himself proved that the language is full of potency, only you have to discover it in the right way possible. And there are many other questions as well. And the questions of the very vexing question of truth, artistic truth. I'm not speaking of moralistic truth or not. I'm not concerned about that. And we are all aware what happened just before the publication of this as a book of Madame Bovary. This very person whose second bicentenary we are observing today, he told us there is no truth, there is only perception. Yes, truth is a very relative term. Perception is what is important. So whether Emma was an immoral character or not, that does not concern us who are now going to in the third decade of the 21st century. This is not a very important issue for us. But as this is the era of very the close reading of all the texts, and there are many theories regarding the efficacy of novelistic discourses, we must understand that language is not only the mirror, it's an old usage, but language is sometimes capable, sometimes it is not. And therefore, so many studies, I found out 2 or 3 studies, but let me not refer to them, regarding the use of language in Madame Bovary in particular. The language is incapable of accounting for an experience, which is changing forthwith and compromise the attempt to express it. And particularly those who are poets, those who love to read poetry, for them, this expression is not mine. This expression you may find in Madame Bovary itself. Language is incapable, I repeat, language is incapable of accounting for an experience which is changed and compromised by the attempt to express it. Now the question comes whether in the text of Madame Bovary, in order to express the very nuances of existence and the meaning of human relationship, whether it was compromised by the author, I think definitely not. But yet, Madame Bovary, as I told you, I'm not concerned about what kind of figure was Emma. But this much I remember from Bakhtin, that there cannot be a figure without a ground. It is a great saying of Mikhail Mikhailovich Bakhtin.
True.
So what is that ground? We have to understand the historical and ethical perspectives of early and mid-19th century. And language emanates from that perspective, because there cannot be any truth, literary or artistic truth or whatever you can think of, where the interrogation of language is not done, and you can really deny its efficacy. Another important observation I have found out, and thanks to you, I was going through the text of Madame Bovary after a long, long time, Kaisar, that there are not very much a good number of and full-blown metaphors in the text. Rather, similes abound, which in Sanskrit and Bengali we call upama. And these are very, very interesting. And in the very end of the text, we find that expression of Flaubert is really anticipating great T.S. Eliot. Is not it very interesting? I quote from the text. Her, that is Emma's, whole existence was spread out like a corpse at a post-mortem. Immediately you can remember which great expression we immediately comes to our mind. But forget about that. Regarding Emma, the author is using these expressions all based on glowing similes. For example, this is regarding Charles, her husband. He felt dreary as an empty house. What a nice expression. He felt dreary as an empty house. Or life was as cold as an attic facing north. And then regarding Emma, sorrow sank deep into her soul with a muffled wailing like the carp on a kitchen table. Then yet another, her dreams dropping.
Now, if you kindly unmute, yeah. It hasn't been unmuted yet. If you kindly unmute. Unmute, right, okay.
Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Whether I am on again?
Yeah, you are. Yes.
Okay.
Can we?
So
right.
I'm not going into further details because it will be time consuming. But whether you can interpret it as the manipulatory presence of the author, but with his narratorial voice. Author, but not with his authorial authority, but
exactly
as the narratorial self. These are the things that has to be very seriously pondered over. Now, the language used in Madame Bovary, right from the very beginning, it's a very big book. All of us know.
So, Tapadhir, can we come back to you a little later to talk about the language, and also what I want specifically from you, if you kindly tell us perhaps a bit more on, many thanks for relating this with the contemporary structural and post-structural theoretical framework. But if you kindly tell us why perhaps Flaubert is still important from readers, definitely, but from writers' point of view, as well. That is something that I would like to ask everyone. And I'll come back to you if you kindly tell us what you are trying to start actually, his language, language issue, is his language and his narrative, which is equally important as his weaving of the storyline.
Right.
Anyway, let us have some audience's feedback, if that's okay. Mitul, if you kindly read some audience's feedback.
Yes, Dr. Binoy Kumar Chattopadhyay, so nice program, I appreciate it. Then John Turai, fabulous program. Muhammad Sadiq is watching. A lot of other people are watching. Hasina Zaman, Kanika Dashgupta. Now I've lost some comments in the live stream.
Many thanks those who are watching. This is an important literary event. Those who have interest in literature, please do share. So that, I mean, this is 199 birthday celebration of Flaubert, and Flaubert needs to be reread and reinterpreted in this time, just to explore the enigma of this time, actually. Flaubert is important just to explore perhaps the enigma that the time has created, and also a new way to develop, to see women, feminist works and women's universe, reinterpret women's universe through Emma perhaps, and through other important works. And also his idea of pantheism that he inherited from Spinoza's idea of religion is perhaps equally important too. But that's why those who are watching, if you kindly share in your timeline and let your friends be the part of this session, at least if we can reach them with the works of Flaubert, with this important token discussion on Flaubert, a phenomenal and iconic writer of world literature, especially the French literature. So many thanks, Mitul, for reading audience's feedback. So many thanks to the audiences who are leaving this very inspiring comments. And it's nice to see that you are watching with profound interest. So let us come back to Shri. Shri, this is, I mean, a wonderful piece you wrote actually on, this is something very important, because when we read perhaps a writer of 19th century, we read I mean, the time of 19th century is different. And perhaps the language, the description, the narrative is different. But unless we can contextualize this narrative with the time we are going through, every text becomes quite futile in my point of view. So if you kindly tell us what intrigues you when you read Bovary, for example. So if you read Bovary now, and you perhaps read it again, I'm sure. How do you relate yourselves? You already quite clearly related Bovary through some characters, actually, especially Emma. Would you like to add anything further on this?
Two things I found very interesting with what my co-speakers have been talking about. First of all, I'd like to mention John when he spoke about the contradiction between the contradiction in the author, you know, in Flaubert, the sort of the paradox, you know, he is the strong man and he's hiding behind his prose and everything. But there is definitely this, somewhere there are emotions, there is this softness. I think good literature, good stories, good work always arise out of paradox. I mean, that's my belief, you know, if there is a crack, if there's a contradiction, if there's a conflict, it's only then that you get entangled in that story. So that is one thing I feel about Flaubert's work, that there is that very subtle contradiction. It creeps on you. I mean, you feel that, oh, he is describing Emma in a certain way, and his writing is flawless. And but you know, I mean, he's in love with Emma. You can, when you read it, you just know. I mean, you cry for the heroine. You're not supposed to, because when the book released, a lot of Proustians, they had a lot of comments, and Emma was the stupid girl, in quotes. You know, she was called very stupid. But now I'll come back to what Enrique said. He spoke about class bias. And that is another thing that Flaubert talks about, which comes out very loud and clear, because actually when we read Anna Karenina, she's this tragic heroine because she wanted love, because she wanted beautiful things. But Emma, she has no help. She has no proper education, just a normal one. You know, she grows up in a farm and she has dreams. And so she is stupid because she has these dreams. So, you know, you can see the difference in the treatment between these two women at that point of time and through times. So definitely, I think Flaubert understood that. Why did he speak about her? I mean, he understood more than, I mean, he had all these things in his mind. There was one line which really, from a feminist point of view, which made an impact on me when I was reading it for the second time, this book, especially when I did it in comparative literature. And we had a debate with my professor because he thought the line wasn't relevant, but then we discussed about it. There is this line in the very end, you know, where Emma's father just says that, tells Charles that you are a good man, you know, you are a good man. You cured my leg is working, something like that, you know.
Exactly.
And he's happy about that. And then he says that for Christmas, a bird will always be ready for you on the table, something like that. So he was welcome to have a feast. But I somehow felt that bird, you know, that animal which had been killed, that sacrifice, I don't know, this is probably far-fetched, but I somehow connected that to Emma in a way, you know, this little girl growing up in a farm, having dreams, reading books, and, you know, yeah, she got eaten. So those are the things I felt, you know, and basically I really respect his writing because as a writer myself.
But did you find what I'm also wanting to find out? I mean, Flaubert is definitely a writer with such a huge sense of proportion, such a frugal sense of proportion. I mean, you won't find just one line more than it is needed. So he has such a great sense of proportion while he was depicting or narrating a story or I mean, perhaps a background scene or something like this, or a scene. But I mean, practically, Flaubert has, apart from Louise Colette, he also had some mistresses. I mean, he had some access to mistresses as well. And did you find anything quite patriarchal in his digests or in his narrative while you read perhaps Madame Bovary or any other writing? Or you perhaps get so much connected into the way he weaved the character Emma. Did you find anything contradictional as a woman?
Yes, I did. First of all, he was very frugal with words, and I really enjoyed that because
exactly.
That's very modern in a way. You know, the way he's taking you to a place without one extra word there. I mean, how he does it, and still it's fluid. But I think he wanted to be. I think he wanted to belong to that mindset. You know, that. But sometimes when you write something, it's beyond your control. You're perhaps using your subconscious things. He wanted to be patriarchal, perhaps, you know, because that was what was normal at that point. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it was important. I mean, if a woman had affairs, it was not okay. But if the man had a mistress, Rudolph, for instance, it was fine. It was normal. So definitely that was the order of the day. And he was projecting reality. But the way he did it was not patriarchal. I don't think he was patriarchal. I mean, I might be very wrong, but
no. That's your own opinion. That's what you're
upholding the reality of that time. You know, exactly what was going on, how it was. It was like taking a picture. You can't just say that this is darker and that is lighter because those were the colors. That was how it was. That was life. But even in doing so, he managed to put in his own, you know, his own confusion, his own contradiction, and maybe his own tenderness. I feel that way. I mean, I might be wrong completely, but that's...
Thank you. Many thanks. Yeah, this was important. I was looking for your own opinion. Let us come back to Mithul. Would you like to would you like to add anything on Flaubert? You are muted at this moment.
Sorry. I'll read another poem. It was in response to one of Flaubert's letter, response of John Sand, and it's called Prophecy of Sand. George
Perhaps
Sand,
some of our readers some of our audiences can relate to George Sand, an iconic writer, a memorialist, and a journalist as well, who was quite popular at that time as well for his inclination to man's satire. He, at that time, actually, especially in 19th century, he used to smoke quite openly. He used to wear man's satire. So that's why she used to wear man's satire. And she was quite close to Flaubert, actually, through some letters, which is equally important for me to explore Flaubert. Perhaps this is, the book is available if you just see letters to George Sand. that may help the audiences to explore another horizon of Flaubert on top of his writing. So please go on.
Yeah, so George Sand wrote this to Flaubert in response to one of his letters, and it's called Prophecy of Sand. Men, they say, dominators, slayers, conquerors. We have been subjugated by their culture and rules, the norms and the religions of masculine fools, the laws and the clowns. The world one day will evolve. We who have the curves and seductive smiles, are we not filled inside with the same DNA? So they say, give us books and untie our bonds. We shall rise up, making empires strong. Mock not my dashing eyes, discount not my luscious thighs. I shall dance your dance into the night. Have no doubt, I shall be your queen. When we are embraced for who we are, do you not see? We shall gleam like the stars in the night, genders, colors, nations too. Leave them sitting in the old church pews. Philosophers, doctors, engineers of creation, we shall be side by side, working with you. So smile and behold the new golden age. Suras must die in the deserts of past sage. Sisters of the sun, the gods and the wind, the old men of the past must rescind. Glories are coming, so rejoice and behold. Equality is the greatest story a woman ever told. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitul. Also, if you kindly would like to, before I move on to Henry, would like to read some audience's feedback. Someone just said, Jofi Shetu, a friend of us, a poet, said no sound. So audience, if you kindly let us know, I can hear, but I'm not sure whether what, perhaps this is from Jofi Shetu's end. He must have some internet issue, but if the audiences feel the same, please let us know whether we have been heard rightly. And please do share this live streaming for your friends, because the words of Flaubert needs to reach wider audiences just to explore the enigma of time. And like I said, the idea of feminism with a new shedding of light. Anyway, Enric, Mitul, if you kindly read some audience's feedback, if that's okay, and then I'll move on to Enric.
Yep, sure. Sure. Debashish Bhattacharya, Sri Ganguly, if there are no questions, there are no answers. Poetry and literature aims to answer questions that have no right answers. They are subject to interpretation. There are many ways to look at the same character. Each bit appeals separately, and that is why we have poetry. Shanko Mitra Dash, amazing program, great initiative. Shumon Bonik, good initiative, amazing program. Utya Bandhopadhyay, thanks to all the speakers for their thoughts of the various facts of Flaubert's writing of Madame Bovary. Krishnapriya Bhattacharya, it is really great to listen to Dr. Tapadhir Bhattacharya's mention of truth, vice versa, perception, expressive power of language, etc.
Thank you. I can see there are many feedback. Many feedback, many thanks to the audiences for your wonderful feedback. Tyler Sidroad, sounds great. Digging the thoughts on Flaubert, everybody rocks. Many thanks for this wonderful feedback. Okay, we can, Debashish Bhattacharya, many thanks, a wonderful friend of us. Many thanks for your input. So now, Enric, if you'd like to continue or if you'd like to add.
Yes, thank you. For me, also in the case of Gustave Flaubert, I want to share the concept of sentimental education. Not only the concept is the title of a novel, very famous novel, no? It's important because in this world that we live, where are the sources of our sentimental education? No? Probably we find it in the social networks. Probably we find it more than reading fiction. We find them watching TV shows in Netflix. No? In the case of Emma Bovary, for example, how she experienced or how she get her sentimental education was through literature. She was a reader, but also we are talking 19th century, the development of science, the development of a lot of revolutions. She follows some kind of scientific methods, no? She didn't stay in theory like Romeo and Juliet and all this, this kind of romantic, in the case of Romeo and Juliet, this famous like Shakespeare tragedy, no? They didn't have this, the experience of life, to experience their love. Everything is stopped. To know what, it's like a fairy tale. We don't know what happened after the prince married the princess, no? So in the case of Madame Bovary, in the case of Emma, this sentimental education is following the scientific method of what's developed in the 19th century. Okay, it's not only the romantic novels. I didn't stay here reading books. I want to enjoy bodies. I want to have lovers and to see which one, like a scientific experiment, would fit my needs, my desire. So, and then she killed herself. So no human body really, or human soul really match her desire. And that is, I think, one of the most important developments in terms of the psyche of the 19th century that later, like a Sigmund Freud, developed with the theories of psychoanalysis, no? But in terms of the concept of sentimental education, also I think in the novel and the character of Frederick, no? The journey, because a sentimental education is a journey, not only through literature, not only through art, but also through life and through love. How we educate ourselves about love. Many of the people in these times are lost because they don't find love. They think they will find it in Tinder or Match or any apps of looking for love, no? But in the times of the 19th century, in the case, for example, the characters of Emma or Frederick from the sentimental education, in the case of Frederick specifically, he get that kind of sentimental education in the city of Paris, no? The big cities are very important to find that kind of sentimental education. We are talking about Paris. In the case of Tolstoy and Anna Karenina, Moscow or St. Petersburg. In the case of Rabindranath Tagore, Calcutta. No, I mean, like the 19th century is the beginning of this flowering big cities where people get educated with sentiments, but also with science, with different elements that make us humans. So that is very important to remember in terms of the legacy of Gustave Flaubert, no?
Yeah, and also I think perhaps we know that he also had some, quite rightly mentioned about some Russian writers, because he was quite a friend and quite happy. He used to have some correspondences with another Russian romantic writer, Ivan Turgenev. I'm sure there are some correspondences. He perhaps met Ivan Turgenev in Paris a few times.
But also the character of Frederick, for example, that sometimes people associated with nihilism, is also connected with other masterpiece of Russian literature, The Hero of Our Time by Mikhail Lermontov, no? And this military officer, but also in both cases, in the case of Frederick and in the case of Pechorin, we have the big events in 19th century. In the case of Russia, the Decembrist revolution that was to change Russian society to a more democratic one. No? And in the case of Eric, the 1848 revolution in Paris, no, interest to change the society for democracy. And later they ended with the Napoleon III empire, no? How 19th century is this space where there are a lot of going on. I think John was talking, and also Tree, and Professor Bhattacharjee, like the idea of the style, how Flaubert used this style to control these kind of passions of life that as a writer, you need to do it in fiction. No? But in 19th century is also the times where many ideas were to control those desires of people, democracy, no? Fascism also, Victorian age, no? Industrial revolution, science, Darwinism. I mean, like a literature, like poetry, in case of Rimbaud, also that changed poetry language. We are thinking 19th century is like a battlefield of ideas, but battlefield also of styles. How we are going to, in some way, understand the human psyche. For example, Shri was talking about feminism, no? It's interesting because it's part of the fights in the 19th century. There is a very important French-Peruvian author and revolutionary thinker, Flora Tristan. She was the relative of Gauguin, the famous French painter. And in the 19th century, Flora Tristan, by herself, she went to Peru to get some kind of inheritance from a relative, no? But she was like that kind of individual. The 19th century is, I mean, for me, it's fascinating because it's the start, the beginning of the individualism, like the bourgeoisie, the middle class, no? The entrepreneur, middle class, trying to change society from the control of aristocracy. No? And I think that is very important to try to pay attention to how the character of Emma Bovary also reflect that kind of individual. Not necessarily like a feminist point of view in general for all the women, no? But in terms of the individual, in terms of individual soul that wants to explore totally, no, her life, in her life. And also like what we have here in our times, and also not necessarily because right now, like reality TV shows, they are not very popular right now, but in the 90s were very popular, in the beginning of the 2000s. Now it's more like see the interactions of the popular people in Twitter or Instagram. But imagine for the 19th century reader to see the life of a common woman, Emma Bovary, with the lovers, the scandal, no? But it's like how incredible this author like Gustave Flaubert show us a real person in some way, like a fiction character, but the life of a real person, the development of her psyche, of her desires too. It's like a reality show from the 19th century to see that. I mean, that things are amazing for me. How he portrayed that kind of character with all the, what Shri was mentioning, this paradox, the contradictions, no? Exactly. It's not a woman to admire, but it's to admire her individualism over the constrictions of society, the structure of society. And I can see that, for example, in a show that I am very fond of, like The Crown, no? Like you see like these royals fighting for love over the structure of the monarchy, no? So it's the same in the case of the 19th century. We have a society, an individual, no? That wants to show, in this case, herself, like Frederick himself, no? Like how we are going to do my sentimental education journey in life, no? So for me, it's very important, this concept that really strikes me totally in our times where the people don't find love, no? Exactly. How these 19th century characters like Frederick or Emma Bovary, they fail to find that kind of real love, but they have this desire to live, desire to experiment radically life, like the same, like Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, no? And she killed herself too, no? But I mean, like how she, in this 19th century, how society is changing, aristocracy is in the retaguarde, is more like a bourgeoisie is taking over society in some way, the bourgeoisie thought, but also the bourgeoisie individualism that totally changed our lives in the 20th century and moreover in the 21st century. Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Many, many thanks for this very insightful input, Enric. Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. John, coming back to you, would like to add anything further?
Well, there's so much that Enrique has said and Shri has said that I would like to respond to. There isn't time to respond to all of it. So I just kind of like to respond to just a few small points, actually. And the first is, why do these novels mean so much? This is a novel that was written 150 years ago. And yet Shri talked about it, reading it when she was 13, and it having a huge impact. And I remember in my teenage year, I read it when I was a teenager, I read many of the great classics of European literature. And I think the kind of thing is that actually we talk about the social media as being the hive mind of the union. And I think literature through time is actually the same thing. It's not something that's dead just because it was written 150 years ago. It has a meaning that helps us to grow as individuals and helps us to find our way through life. And I think that's what reading Flaubert does now, because women who read Madame Bovary, for instance, don't feel that it's something that's totally irrelevant. It's something that, yes, they can move forward. And we know that feminism is totally different and it's not a feminist novel, but it has a very powerful emotional impact. So that's one thing. And the other thing I'd like to say, that the interesting thing, and this is relating to what Enrique was talking about, is that the interesting idea that what Emma Bovary was doing was outrageous was actually a 19th century concept in itself. And it's a very middle class concept because, for instance, one of the things is that marriage as an institution is not an old institution. It was introduced in 1753 by Lord Hardwicke. And the reason that in this country, and it followed suit in other European countries, but he introduced that because children didn't want to be caught up in the property. Upper class children were fighting against being property pawns, and so they were going off to get married and have relationships outside that. And so the Marriage Act was introduced to introduce bans in church, B-A-N-N, in church, so that parents had a chance to intervene and stop children getting married. And so the whole thing about marriage, and the reason why women were particularly victims of it, was because it's part of the property spectrum. And women, of course, you had to prove paternity, so you'd can't, and that was the big problem of this. So I think one of the things is that we have still have a very capitalistic interpretation of novels of the 19th century, and actually, and a very middle class view of a 19th century novel, which somebody from the peasant class in the 18th century wouldn't have a clue about, because marriages were much more equally based about shared labor. So that's just one thing I'd like to say. I mean, just pick up on one of the points is that the whole idea of individualism and marriage came out of the Romantic movement, and as a rejection of the failure of the French Revolution. What are we going to do? Revolution doesn't work. We've got to find ourselves as individuals. So I think one of the things is that quite extraordinary is that there are so many contexts involved in this novel and in our own way. And I think actually we have a lot to learn, basically. And I think that Tapa was referring to the context earlier, and I think it's so important. Okay, that's me. I've done.
Thank you. Many thanks, John. Our next last speaker is Tapadhir Bhattacharjee. Tapadhir, if you kindly add your further notes. If you kindly unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, Kaisa, thank you. Let me first once again offer my heartfelt thanks, because I was very intently listening to what Enrique and John were speaking. Indeed, this has become an intellectual feast altogether, very thought-provoking. And this is, and thus today's meet has been really meaningful for, I think, all the listeners as well. Listening to both of them, they have two different approaches, but this is only natural. This has to be expected. I was wondering, at the threshold of the third decade of 21st century, when everything is in a flux, we are engulfed by social comma, cultural comma, and comma of many sorts, historical comma. How do we look back to a text which was written 163 years in the past, when the society was different? It is in France, and yet it was simmering within. It was looking for a new path in the future. And so it is not a very easy task also. We must remember the great thinkers. Not only, I'm not talking of the literary thinkers alone. I'm thinking of thinkers in all the aspects of human society. And they were abounding in Europe in particular, and France in particular, and Europe in general. Now, we are here at, particularly, just think of me, I am in the northeast part of remote India. Of course, remoteness does not carry any sense these days. I was just wondering how we really reread to get what message, or the expectation of any message now from a text which is 163 years old does not hold water anymore. So we must go forward in finding out, in searching for a completely new meaning in the hermeneutical. And I'm not talking of the hermeneutical meaning alone. I'm talking of the sociological meaning. I'm thinking of all, taking into account all the sorts of meanings. Why Emma has to fail? Why Emma's husband also fails? Whether these failures are nothing.
Wow.
These are, whether this is only a thing which you can just push over, and why the two figures, one is Rodolphe, another is Leon, they behave in the way they do. I remember one comment. Maybe this was by a critic of Madame Bovary in particular. He said, I may not quote the exact in verbatim, but then why, he asked a question, why these characters, he said, behave in the way, were there no other exception? No. Why? Maybe you might, anybody can think that this question does not make any sense. X is behaving in a particular manner in a particular society at a particular point of time. Why that person is behaving in this manner? Well, we did not talk further regarding you brought forward the question of feminist reading, Feminist reading always thinks of, as I understand, as far as my understanding goes, about the self-construction of a female self. But here we find she is systematically destroying herself. Why she is destroying herself? There may be 3 or 4 or many other responses to that. But I quote once again from the text. Flaubert writes in chapter 9 of part 2, chapter 9. She, that is Emma, remembered the heroines of the books she had read, and that lyrical legion of adulteresses began to sing in her memory with sisterly voices that enchanted her. She was becoming a part of her own imaginings. Are we not? I'm not speaking of the female selves alone. Are we not all the captives of our own imaginations? So this particular expression is not confined perhaps only in the mid-19th century. It holds good for these days as well. Now that poses another question. Then why we reread him, for what kind of reinterpretation we are seeking for? That answer, of course, I cannot impose on anybody, definitely not on our viewers, but I think this is the most important question to which we must respond in the right perspective as also in the right way. But the fact remains that Madame Bovary is a text which cannot be pushed aside. You have to read it remembering the context in which it was placed, and thereby you used in the very beginning a word, I remember, Kaiser, recontextualizing. So I harp on that. Recontextualization of the text, Madame Bovary, and whatever is included in the text is also ingredients that make up that text. So this much I am telling now because here we are approaching almost 11 p.m.
Yeah, we are exactly. We are also approaching to the end, Tapadhir. I will just ask for the final comment before we end. If we just start from Enric, if we just start from Shri before we end, just if you'd like to add your concluding note, Shri.
It's not really a concluding note, but just a thought that popped in my mind after what Enrique said. He was speaking about individualism, and I'd read somewhere how individualism can be more suicidogenic. This was an article I had read long back, and suddenly I just felt that Flaubert is actually raising questions on life and death, suicide as well here. That's a different topic and, maybe some other time, but that is something as well about ending your life. So, and that is one thing that I found relevant. And it was incredible listening to everyone and just tuning in to everyone's thoughts and talking about this wonderful book that has stood the test of time. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly, Shri. Like I shared with you, that I'm trying to develop a musical, opera style, musical and completely Indian interpretation of Madame Bovary. Perhaps we'll talk on this, and then we will do it as a collaboration, actually. I'm just...
It demands it because she was so much into Parisian culture and opera, so that kind of dramatics. Sorry, that's it, it demands it.
Thank you. And then if Enric would like to add your concluding note before we finish, Enric. Enric, if you kindly unmute yourselves.
Thank you, Ahmed, John, Professor Bhattacharjee, Sri. I think this event for me is how we appreciate the power of literature and arts in our times. No? That is the big point here, to pay tribute to a figure like Flaubert in terms of different messages to new generations, to new writers. For example, when we are talking about style, no? How he crafted that kind of unique style and create new literature in terms of realism, no? And we see like, I don't know, in Latin America, or I don't know, in English, this lack of the craft of language for many writers. That kind of message, the important to focus on language, focus on style, for the new generations of writers, And that for me is important message. Also, the question about desires, individualism, For example, she was mentioning me in her last, when she was speaking, how a writer really can expose all the contradictions of society through the development of some kind of spectacular characters like Frederick in The Sentimental Education or Emma Bovary, I mean, like there are many questions and many findings that Flaubert give us in our time. For example, these times, the letters of a writer, writers are not interesting anymore to tell us how they write stories. Actually, like when you see shows in Netflix of this kind of right now, our database of sentimental education, we don't pay much attention of the author. We don't know who is producing the episodes of The Crown or this new Disney show Mandalorian. We care about the characters, we care about the Mandalorian, we care about Baby Yoda, about the characters but not about the crafter. And I think it's very important to go back to this idea of the author, how he created this kind of style to expose and to really show us in a controlled way, not totally controlling, but in some way using the paradigm of control to show us how society works, But because we are talking about 19th century, 19th century where these many ideas were fighting to really to make hegemony in the world, That is my final thoughts about Flaubert, how the importance of style and writing, crafting in our times where there is a lot of lack of crafting, Thank you so much.
Thank you. Many thanks, Enric, for your final input. Many thanks. John Fandon, if you kindly add your concluding note, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to thank for all the speakers for their contributions. And I think one of the things that I'd like to conclude by saying is, isn't it hugely fascinating that here we are having this inspirational and intellectual conversation about a writer who was writing 150 years ago. And that is something that's quite extraordinary for a writer today. It's this thought that we're not just by ourselves, we're not just writing by ourselves, we're part of this whole panoply of humanity that stretches back through history. And we as individual writers are part of that. And we can inspire not just the readers today, but readers 150 years from now. And that's but not through our own self-importance. It's because actually we are all little nerves in this big human spirit and spiritual brain that stretches forward and back through time. And I think that's both humbling and inspiring at the same time. And thank you for everybody in this discussion for reminding me of that, because it's given me a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Many thanks, John. Tapadhir, if you kindly add your final and concluding notes.
Well, I can only say I have already told what I thought I must be sharing with you. Now, the thing is that I had another thing after listening to both John and Enrique, that we must find some way in reading from our own cultural perspective, because that thing matters in reinterpreting a text which does not really belong to our continent, and also find in the same breath, remember the world perspective, the international human perspective, because that human perspective, as Enrique was making some hints, hinting to all these things, well, the human perspective matters. And now in your program, Kaisar, you have been always talking about world literature and all that. And only when we find out a means to blend our own perspective with the world perspective, I think the reading of Madame Bovary, Sentimental Education, and for that matter, his collected works, everything will be meaningful. Because after all, we are in pursuit of meanings, human meanings. This much for today. Thank you. And once again to you and to both John, Enrique, and Sri, and others.
Many thanks, Tapadhir. Let me, before we finish, let me read some audience's wonderful comments. Krishnapriya Bhattacharya, rereading, retextualizing today's great lines. Sally Parrott, a modern version, as you described, would be interesting. Yes, that is something that we are trying to do, a modern version of Emma in musical. Hope you will follow our work. So this will be an Indian interpretation and, like I said, modern version of Emma. Krishnapriya Bhattacharya, many thanks for presenting such an interactive session. Sujata Ghosh-Totto, very enriching discussion. So many thanks to all of our audiences who left a wonderful comment. And like I said before, the final episode of 100 Words Around the World for Love is happening on 17th, on Thursday, 17th of December. So please join us. And as you know, a book, an anthology will be published by the middle of next year on the basis of the poetry poems being read as part of 100 Words Around the World for Love. And also there are many literature, many conversation sessions will be featured in a regular basis. And that is in conversation with some contemporary philosophers, contemporary leading writers and poets, as you know. So please join us. Please help us and support us as you did. Shamim Shahan, the editor of the Granthi, if you kindly add your concluding note.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks a lot, my honorable guest, for your insightful talk and reading. Absolutely grateful for your time. Many thanks to dear audience, follower, and many thanks to poet Ahmed Kaisar. Big thanks who have watched this live session. Stay alert, safe life. Thank you.
So many thanks to all of our speakers. Shri, wonderful works, actually. John, many thanks for your beautiful input, John and Enrique. An immense gratitude to you all, and immense gratitude to the audiences who left so many inspiring comments and shared and supported the whole session. So please stay safe. and have a wonderful rest of the evening. And good night, perhaps. Well, for Henry, this is perhaps the start of the day. But audiences who are watching it from India, Bangladesh, or South Asia, and perhaps in some parts of Europe, have a wonderful rest of the evening and see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.